India winning the T20 World Cup of 2024 not only ensured that their 11-year wait or 13-year wait, depending on what it is you're judging, 11 years for an ICC trophy, 13 years for a World Cup, that wait came to an end. It also ensured that they became only the third team in the history of the T20 World Cup to have won the title on multiple occasions. The first, of course, were the West Indies, who did it in 2012 and 2016. After that, you had England, who had multiple triumphs in 2010, and then 12 years later in 2022. India, the gap was much longer. You had 2007 and then 2024, putting in a 17-year gap between ICC tournament wins, which doesn't really always give you fertile ground for comparisons, given that the squads would have changed so much in that 17-year time period. But that's what we're going to do anyway, and in this video we're going to do a little bit of analysis and compare and see where it is that there were similarities between India's 2007 and 2024 triumph and where it is there are some differences. Now, there are some clear and obvious differences, and let's start off by looking at 2007. First off, it is worth noting that in 2007, India were, by every stretch of the imagination, a young side, and they were very much underdogs. There was no pressure on them due to a rather poor World Cup that had taken place earlier that year in the West Indies. You ended up getting knocked out in the group stages thanks to losses from Sri Lanka and, of course, Bangladesh. Your only win came against Namibia, and it was something that hurt the cricketing fans a lot, especially when you consider that in 2003, India had finished runners-up. So to go from runners-up to group stage exit was a big hurt. But this team went with no baggage. It was a relatively young team. It was being led by a first-time captain. You didn't even send a full-time coach. Lalchand Rajput was the cricket manager. He wasn't officially the coach. And what's more, the T20 format as a whole wasn't something that was as big as it is now. It was in fact very new. This was the maiden World Cup that would be taking place with this format. So everyone was curious as to how it would go. But put it this way, if India didn't win the tournament, perhaps it wouldn't have created that much of a ripple, or at best would have been met by a little bit of indifference from the Indian fans. There was more disappointment at the ODI World Cup showing than there was optimism at the showing that they would have in the 2007 T20I World Cup. Now contrast that to 2024. You took a very experienced side. In fact, if you compare the sides from 22 to 24, there weren't that many changes. There were a few notable ones, but the core of the side remained more or less the same. And then the one big difference is that you were in the midst of an 11-year drought when you were in fact the team that were more often than not expected to be competing for and even winning ICC trophies on a regular basis. India over the past 11 years had developed a reputation for making it far enough but then freezing or choking in the knockouts. This was something that was definitely adding a little bit of pressure. And to make things worse, there were doubts over whether their T20 approach was a good enough one. In fact, many people said that the approach they had was a dated one, it needed to be changed, and perhaps those changes wouldn't come as long as you had the same group of players. How wrong you can say they were. So there definitely, as we saw, some differences, but there's also a few similarities. In fact, two noteworthy similarities when you're looking at it. One is that in 2007 and 2024, India were definitely not the clear-cut, ironclad favourites. They were in many ways the underdogs, more so in 2007 than 24, but in both cases, neither of them were being pegged as the favorites to go all the way. Yes, people thought that they'd have a good showing, but that would be the extent of it. And what's even more interesting is that in both cases, they were actually in the midst of ICC trophy droughts. In 2007, the last ICC tournament that you had won, not counting the 2002 shared Champions Trophy, you'd won outright was 83. So you were in the midst of a 24-year drought at that point in time as well. You hadn't tasted ICC glory, despite the fact that you were definitely on the up as a team and good enough to be hanging out with and beating the big boys. In 2024, it was another 11-year drought, more often than not down to your own failings than to those around you or anyone else being exceptionally good. So there's two major differences, and what it does show you is that maybe India works better as an underdog team, something that's not possible given the financial clout as well as the massive fan following and the huge talent pool that India now has in the sport of cricket. But it's definitely interesting to see that there are plenty of similarities and even a few differences, key differences from the two sides. One, of course, hopes that India's third T20 World Cup doesn't take this much of a gap to come along, because again, maybe then this comparison for the next time around might not be so valid. What do you guys think about it? Agree, disagree? Is there something else you'd like to add? You can let us know that in the comments below, and don't forget to like this video, share it with your friends, subscribe to the channel, tap the bell icon, follow us also on social media. We're on Instagram, X and Facebook. Don't forget to download the Sportsbook app, and if you're already on the channel, go ahead and check out some other things we've done as well. For now though, from my side, it is goodbye.